In 1960, the average Japanese family consumed over 300 pounds of white rice per person every year. That's nearly a pound of white rice every single day. Rice for breakfast as onigiri, rice balls wrapped in seaweed. Rice for lunch in a bento box. Rice for dinner alongside miso soup and grilled fish. 3 times a day, every day, for their entire lives. The diabetes rate in Japan at that time was less than 2%. Today, Americans eat roughly 20 pounds of rice per year, most of it brown rice or wild rice, the kinds nutritionists tell you are healthier. Our diabetes rate is over 11% and climbing. The Japanese ate 15 times more rice than we do, all of it white rice, and had 1/5 the diabetes. So what did Japanese families know about eating rice that we've completely forgotten? The answer isn't that Japanese people have special genetics. When Japanese families immigrated to America and adopted American eating habits, their diabetes rates skyrocketed to match ours within a single generation. Studies tracking second-generation Japanese Americans in California found diabetes rates of 10% by the 1980s, nearly matching the general American population. The answer isn't that they ate less food overall. Records from the 1950s show Japanese farmers and factory workers consumed over 2,500 calories per day, with rice providing nearly 60% of those calories. They weren't starving. They were thriving on a food that your doctor probably told you to avoid. Before we go deeper, drop a comment and tell us, have you been told to limit rice because of blood sugar concerns? What did your doctor or nutritionist say? Let us know below, because what you're about to discover will change how you see every grain on your plate. Pick up a bag of instant rice at your supermarket. Read the directions. Boil water, pour in rice, wait 10 minutes, serve. This isn't how rice was meant to be eaten. It's a food product engineered for speed, not for your body. Modern instant rice is parboiled under pressure, then dried, then sold to you in a form that cooks faster than your body can handle it. The glycemic index of instant white rice is 87, higher than a Snickers bar at 68. Let that sink in. Your quick rice side dish spikes your blood sugar faster than candy. The result is a blood sugar spike so sharp it rivals drinking a can of soda. Your pancreas dumps insulin to handle the glucose flood. Your blood sugar crashes an hour later. You feel hungry again, sometimes shaky, always craving more carbs. Do this 3 times a day, every day, and you're on the express train to insulin resistance. But it's not just instant rice. Even regular white rice, the kind sold in bulk at grocery stores, has been stripped of something critical. Modern milling, perfected in the 1880s with steel rollers, removes the bran and the germ, leaving pure white starch. This process was considered progress. White rice looked cleaner, symbolized wealth, cooked faster, and lasted longer on shelves without going rancid. What nobody realized at the time was that removing those outer layers also removed the fiber, B vitamins, and oils that slowed digestion. What's left behind is essentially pure starch that hits your bloodstream like refined sugar. A cup of cooked white rice eaten alone produces nearly the same blood glucose response as drinking a can of Coca-Cola. Your body doesn't recognize it as the complex whole grain it once was. It recognizes it as an emergency glucose delivery, and when that glucose arrives all at once, your insulin system goes into overdrive. Traditional Japanese families didn't eat rice this way. The rice was the same white rice, yes, but everything around it was completely different. First, they never, ever ate rice alone. Every meal included miso soup made from fermented soybean paste, at least 2 types of pickled vegetables called tsukemono, and a small portion of fish or tofu. This wasn't about variety or trying to hit food groups. It was about biology, though they didn't call it that. The fermented miso contained living enzymes and beneficial bacteria. The pickled vegetables, fermented in salt or rice bran for weeks or months, were full of lactobacillus bacteria. These weren't just side dishes, they were digestive aids. Studies from the University of Tokyo in 2009 found that eating fermented foods with rice reduced the glycemic response by up to 30%. The bacteria and enzymes in fermented foods slow down how quickly carbohydrates break down into glucose. They essentially pre-digest some of the starches before they hit your bloodstream. The rice was still there, still white, still starchy, but your body processed it completely differently. In a traditional Japanese breakfast, you might have a small bowl of rice, but it came with natto, fermented soybeans that are so powerful they're almost medicinal. You had miso soup with seaweed and tofu. You had pickled daikon radish. The rice was maybe 40% of the meal by volume, but it was surrounded by protective foods that controlled how your body handled it. We took the rice, dumped the protection, and then blamed the rice when people got sick. Second, and this is critical, they let rice cool before eating it. In traditional Japanese homes, rice was cooked in the morning, often before dawn, and allowed to sit at room temperature for hours before being served. Sometimes it was deliberately refrigerated overnight and eaten cold the next day in onigiri, or as leftover breakfast. This wasn't laziness or poverty. This was chemistry that modern science only recently understood. When rice cools, something remarkable happens at the molecular level. The starch molecules, which are loose and gelatinized when hot, begin to recrystallize into tight structures. Scientists call this resistant starch, and it behaves nothing like regular starch in your digestive system. Let's talk about what resistant starch actually does, because this is where it gets fascinating. When you eat hot, freshly cooked rice straight from the pot, the starch is in what's called an amorphous gelatinized form. It's basically starch with its molecular structure loosened up by heat and water. Your digestive enzymes can attack it easily, breaking it down rapidly into glucose molecules. It floods your bloodstream within 30 minutes. But when rice cools for several hours, especially in the refrigerator, those starch molecules form tight crystalline structures that your digestive enzymes struggle to penetrate. A 2015 study in the Journal of Nutritional Science found that cooled and reheated rice had 50% more resistant starch than freshly cooked rice. Same calories on paper. Completely different effect on your blood sugar. These resistant starches pass through your small intestine largely undigested. They travel to your large intestine, where gut bacteria ferment them into short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. Research from the University of Surrey in 2017 demonstrated that people who ate cooled rice had 15% better insulin response compared to those eating the same rice hot. The butyrate produced actually helps repair your gut lining and improves insulin sensitivity. You're essentially turning rice into fiber. The cooking method mattered too, though nobody thought of it as a health intervention. Traditional Japanese rice was cooked in heavy ceramic or cast iron pots with tight-fitting wooden lids. The rice steamed gently for 30 to 40 minutes over low heat, allowing the grains to absorb water fully and cook through without breaking apart. The slow, even heat created rice with intact grain structure. Modern rice cookers, despite their convenience, often use high heat and pressure to speed up the process to 15 or 20 minutes. This rapid cooking gelatinizes the starch more completely, breaking down the grain structure and making it easier for your digestive enzymes to convert to glucose. A study from Kyoto University in 2012 compared rice cooked traditionally versus in modern high-pressure cookers. The traditionally cooked rice had a glycemic index 12 points lower. Slower cooking meant slower digestion, more stable blood sugar, less insulin required. Your ancestors weren't being inefficient. They were working with their biology, not against it. Here's where the story gets devastating. In the 1970s and 1980s, Japan modernized rapidly. Convenience stores called konbini started selling pre-packaged hot rice meals in the 1970s. Instant rice became common in households by the 1980s. Working families stopped making miso soup from scratch and started using instant miso paste with less fermentation time. The tradition of cooking rice in the morning and letting it cool disappeared as microwaves made reheating instant and easy. People started eating rice the American way, fresh and hot, straight from the cooker to the plate. They kept eating the same amount of rice, but stripped away every protective practice. Between 1980 and 2010, Japan's diabetes rate increased by over 300%, from under 2% to over 7%. The rice didn't change. The variety didn't change. The amount didn't change much. How they prepared and ate it changed everything. Compare this to other Asian countries that maintained traditional eating patterns longer, and the pattern becomes undeniable. In rural Thailand through the 1990s, where families still ate sticky rice with fermented fish paste called pla ra and let rice sit before serving, diabetes rates remained below 5%. In South Korea, where kimchi and other fermented vegetables remained standard with every single meal, the diabetes rate stayed below 6%, despite rice consumption matching Japan's traditional levels. But in Hong Kong and Singapore, where Western fast food and convenience culture arrived in the 1970s and 1980s, diabetes rates exploded. Hong Kong went from 3% in 1980 to over 10% by 2010. Same genetics, same rice, different preparation, different results. The pattern is so clear it's almost painful to see. What we lost wasn't just a cooking technique or a grandmother's recipe. We lost the entire ecological system that made rice safe to eat in large quantities. We lost the fermented side dishes that contained gut-healthy bacteria and digestive enzymes. We lost the practice of cooling rice to create resistant starch. We lost the slow, gentle cooking methods that produced lower glycemic grains with intact structure. We lost the cultural knowledge that starch should never be eaten isolated from fiber, fat, and fermented foods. We lost the understanding that food is only as healthy as the context in which you eat it. And we replaced all of it with the simplistic idea that rice itself is the problem, that carbs are the enemy, that traditional diets were inferior. It's not. They weren't. We just forgot how to do it right. The cost of this forgotten knowledge is measured in millions of people told to avoid rice entirely, only to replace it with processed foods that are demonstrably worse. It's measured in millions more developing diabetes, despite eating less rice than their grandparents ever did. It's measured in entire food cultures abandoned because Western nutrition science thought it knew better. Asian Americans today have among the highest diabetes rates of any ethnic group in the United States, over 13%, despite eating less total carbohydrates than the general population. Why? Because they adopted American eating patterns, eating hot rice alone or with non-fermented sides, while keeping some rice in their diet, but stripped away all the protective traditional practices that made rice safe. They took the worst of both worlds. Some researchers and home cooks are rediscovering these principles, and the results are exactly what you'd expect. Dr. Sudhir James, a biochemist at Sri Lanka's College of Chemical Sciences, published research in 2015 showing that adding coconut oil to rice while cooking, then cooling it in the refrigerator for 12 hours, increased resistant starch by over 60%. Traditional Sri Lankan cooking had used this exact method for generations, adding coconut milk to rice and serving it the next day. Science just confirmed what grandmothers already knew. In Los Angeles, a group of Japanese-American families started a project called Traditional Table in 2019, teaching younger generations to prepare rice the old way, cook it slowly, let it cool, serve it with homemade miso and pickles. Participants reported better energy levels, more stable blood sugar readings, and the ability to eat rice again without guilt or blood sugar crashes. The principle extends far beyond rice, and this is what makes it so important. Every culture that thrived on a staple grain, that built civilizations and raised healthy children on starch, had methods to make it digestible. Sourdough fermentation for wheat in Europe, where wild yeast predigested the gluten and starches over 12 to 24 hours. Nixtamalization for corn in Mexico, where corn was soaked in lime water to unlock nutrients and reduce the glycemic impact. Fermented rice water in parts of West Africa. Injera, the fermented teff bread of Ethiopia. These weren't random traditions or superstitions. They were solutions to the same biological problem we face today. How do you eat starch without destroying your metabolism? The answer was never to avoid it. The answer was to prepare it correctly, to surround it with fermented foods, to cool it and create resistant starch, to eat it slowly as part of a complete meal, not gulped down alone. And we forgot how. We called it progress when we invented instant rice and microwave meals. We called it efficiency when we stopped fermenting our foods. We called it modern when we started eating hot rice alone. And then we blamed the rice when we got sick. Traditional Japanese rice preparation wasn't about following recipes. It was about understanding that food is only as healthy as the context in which you eat it. Rice alone is just starch. Rice with fermented vegetables, cooled and reheated, eaten slowly as part of a complete meal with protein and healthy fats, becomes something entirely different in your body. This is the knowledge that kept diabetes under 2% in a country eating a pound of white rice per person per day. Not special genetics, not starvation, not magic, just biology, respected and worked with instead of ignored. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever tried eating rice that's been cooled and reheated? Do you eat fermented foods like miso, kimchi, or sauerkraut with your meals? What traditional food preparation methods from your own culture have been lost or forgotten? Let's share what we've learned because this knowledge is too valuable to lose again.